A Quilt Full of Memories by Joanne Ryder. Illustrated by Margaret Cusack. Betsy liked to stop by her great-grandmother's house and visit. One day, Betsy found her daydreaming in the parlor. "Penny for your thoughts," said Betsy, surprising her with a hug. "Hi, sweetie," said Great-Grandma. "I was just thinking of a new project." "It couldn't be a new quilt," said Betsy. "You know me too well," said Great-Grandma, smiling. "But this one is going to be very special." There was a big piece of green material spread on the table. "Oh, I like this," said Betsy. "It looks like spring grass." "I thought so too," said Great-Grandma. "It will make a nice background for the new quilt I'm planning." "I want to put something from everyone in our family in this quilt," Great-Grandma said, pointing to the scraps of clothing on the table. "It will be a special memory quilt. Would you like me to help? Or would you like to help me?" she asked. "Oh, yes," Betsy said, quickly. She loved sewing, but this was the first time Great-Grandma had ever asked for her help. "Which design do you like best?" asked Great-Grandma. "This one looks like flowers," said Betsy. "I like that one too," said Great-Grandma. "Let's start tomorrow." On the way home, Betsy noticed the spring flowers blooming everywhere. Multicolored wildflowers dotted the grassy field. "How pretty," thought Betsy. "Our quilt is going to look as lovely as this." She hoped Great-Grandma had something of hers to sew into the quilt. She wanted to have a special place in the family quilt, too. The next day, Betsy and her great-grandmother started to work. "These scraps of cloth are all full of family stories," said Great-Grandma, as she showed Betsy how to mark and cut the cloth. Betsy carefully marked some white cloth. "That's left over from my wedding dress," said Great-Grandma, pointing to an old photo on the wall. "You look so happy," said Betsy. "I was," said Great-Grandma. "That's a happy day to put in our quilt." Betsy cut up some pale blue material. "That's my son's shirt," said Great-Grandma. "My son, your grandpa, was a fiddler. That was his lucky shirt. He wore it to the dance where he met your grandma." Great-Grandma began humming a folk song her son liked to play. "We're learning that in chorus," said Betsy, and she sang along. "This will add a little luck to our quilt," said Great-Grandma, counting the patches Betsy had cut. Spring passed and summer began. Great-Grandma helped Betsy learn the ways of her old sewing machine. Whenever they could, they worked on the quilt. Each scrap of cloth had a story. As they sewed, Great-Grandma told the tales about Betsy's aunts and uncles. Betsy still wondered if there was room for something of hers in their quilt. She had put her old pink shirt into the scrap bag. "Will everyone in our family be part of the quilt?" asked Betsy. "I think so," said Great-Grandma. After working hard, they would stop and rest outside. Often, Betsy brought some cookies and milk to the porch. "Your mamma loved to climb those trees," said Great-Grandma one afternoon. "That purple material you used today was from her blouse. She tore it getting a bird's old nest." Swinging in the oak tree, Betsy looked up, trying to imagine a girl climbing high above. "I'll have to try that when I get back from summer camp," she thought. When Betsy went away to camp, she wondered how the quilt was coming along. Great-Grandma hadn't cut her shirt. Would she use it or not? She wrote her great-grandma letters telling her about camp, and her great-grandma wrote to her, "You won a sewing medal. That's grand, Betsy. I'm so proud of you. When I look at our quilt, I think of all the good times we had making it. To me, it's full of memories of you. The quilt is coming along just fine. I should have it all done by the time you get back. Come over and we'll celebrate. Love, Great Grandma. I think it's a good idea. Here, let me read the letter that Betsy had sent to Great Grandma first. Dear Great Grandma, I wished you were here yesterday. I won a medal for sewing. My friends really liked the pillow I made, and I'm going to show them how to make their own. I can't wait to see how our quilt is coming along. Tomorrow, I want to make an even nicer pillow for you. Love, Betsy. As soon as she could, Betsy ran over to her great-grandmother's home. The finished quilt was spread on the porch. "Oh, Great-Grandma," Betsy said, "it's bigger than I remembered and prettier than I ever imagined." Betsy looked at the green quilt full of colorful patches, like the nearby fields in spring. She knew now that all the bright patches were full of stories about her family. All those memories were held together with stitches sewn by her and her great-grandma. "Those are new," Betsy said, pointing to tiny pink hearts in the center of each flower. "I thought you wanted me to do something special with your pink shirt," said Great-Grandma. "You're the heart of this quilt for me." "You know me too well, Great-Grandma," said Betsy, smiling. "I did want that." "Now," said Great-Grandma, "look under the quilt." Betsy lifted a corner of the quilt. Next to another pink heart, Great-Grandma had sewn a message. "The quilt is really mine?" asked Betsy. "Yes," said Great-Grandma. "I planned it that way all along. I wanted you to have our memory quilt." "Thank you so much," Betsy said softly. "I love it, and I love you." Here's where it says right here. This family quilt was made for Betsy Masters by herself and her great-grandmother, Ellen. May she feel her family's love around her always. August 2nd, or August 22nd, I'm sorry. That night, Betsy snuggled under her new quilt. She smiled, touching the different patches and the tiny hearts. Her family, and especially her great-grandma, seemed very close to her. As she drifted asleep, Betsy felt very happy and lucky, wrapped in the warmth of her wonderful memory quilt. The end. What a great story. I loved that.